Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus, where we explore complex metaphysical supernatural topics and sometimes spiritual life advice, which I think we can learn from people's experiences with the other side, with some of the things that we explore and talk about on this channel. So on this video, that's sort of what we're going into. It's the idea that the whole world has become a completely neurotic place, and this is what people listening should be actively doing in their lives if they want to cope with that collective neuroses. And this also applies to anyone at any stage in their lives. But a lot of these revelations really came to me from some of the books I have been reading lately, such as Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. In addition to that, Michael Time, which has an excellent blog that predominantly focuses on life after death, has encapsulated some of these points in an article he posted back in June called Getting to the Root Cause of America's Madness. And I would say that this root cause could theoretically be applied to all across Western civilization, as well as almost anywhere throughout time, because it's a very universal problem that people have. So, before we go further, you are watching Afterlife Topics, where we go into a lot of these issues. Hopefully it's of benefit to you. Hopefully it'll give you some direction, some positivity, some things to think about, especially as we search and create new meaning in our lives. If you like this kind of thing, please hit that subscribe button, or possibly if you want to get involved, work with me, do coaching, that kind of thing, you can get involved at the Patreon page, patreon.com/Afterlife Topics. You can contact me personally on there as well if you want to donate and help keep this whole thing going. Okay, so to continue. So in this article by Michael Time, he discusses a lot of the issues that are faced by Western civilization when people basically lose a sense of meaning in their lives. And so, of course, in this blog, and there's many years now of extraordinary articles that Michael puts up, and by the way, he's also a contributor on the Afterlife Topics forum on Facebook if you ever want to talk to him personally. But the main point has typically been about life after death and the extraordinary amounts of evidence that accompanies it. And historical accounts throughout the decades, throughout the centuries, going into people's experiences with spiritualism, mediumship, and some of the really hard evidence that encapsulates the best of this field. So one thing that I have noticed is that people who do focus on this concept of higher realities, higher dimensions, they tend to have more fulfilling lives. And just as kind of like a off-the-cuff observation I've made, it seems like people who are a bit healthier, they live longer, they have a lot less stress. I've heard about a lot of people in their hundreds, people 105, 110 even, who turns out have very strong foundations in spiritual concepts. Sometimes that manifests as religion, but I do think as people age and become wiser, religion makes way for kind of rational or objective spirituality, which is, of course, what I talk about, what I write my books about, and what we usually talk about on this channel. So, to go back to the article, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit to his citation of Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl, of course, wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and he's the pioneer of logotherapy, and logo coming from Latin, meaning. So logos therapy, which is a way. It's actually one of the very well respected psychiatric branches out of Vienna, and it's a little bit parallel or contrary, actually, I should say, to Freudian psychology. Logotherapy is much more centered on finding a kind of that spiritual backbone in people and helping bring it out to the surface. So Michael quotes Viktor Frankl, refers to mass neurotic syndrome as the result of an existential vacuum, a feeling of emptiness and meaninglessness in people's lives. The more one seeks pleasure, Frankl observed, the more it eludes him. Pleasure is and must remain a side effect or byproduct, and is destroyed and spoiled to the degree in which it is made a goal in itself. A human being, he continued, is not one in pursuit of happiness, but one in search of a reason to become happy. Self-actualization, he further proclaimed, is possible only as a side effect of self-transcendence. So before we move on to the next quote, or the next, actually his next point. So Viktor Frankl's book, Viktor Frankl, I mean, I don't know what his personal beliefs were, if he was a spiritual person, an atheist. He seemed somewhere in the middle, but he was, of course, a survivor of numerous concentration camps. And in his most famous book, he recounts his stories in the concentration camps and what things led people to always be looking forward to the next day. And it was typically those people who had something to look forward to, or had some kind of a meaning or a purpose in their lives, who managed to survive a lot more often than those people who gave up hope. And in fact, in the concentration camps, people who gave up hope were typically seen to die very quickly. He signified this as when he would see a fellow inmate at Auschwitz or Dachau or wherever he was imprisoned smoking a cigarette, because it was very difficult to come by cigarettes. So if you had a cigarette, typically you would trade it for an extra ration of food. But if someone chose to smoke their cigarette instead, it meant that they were choosing short-term pleasure over the long-term future, and it meant that they gave up. And when you saw someone smoking a cigarette, within a couple days, you were sure to find that they will be dead. If they don't take their own lives, then they just stop responding and stop fighting, and then they just die on the piece of straw that they're sleeping on, or whatever it may be. So unfortunately, even in the normal world beyond concentration camps, similar effects happen to people. And one of the reasons that we're in such a state of neurosis right now in the world is because of the pandemic. Obviously, it's because of politics, because of people sometimes on this negative feedback loop on the internet, reading politics, reading all this negative stuff, all this divisive stuff, and then being locked away because of the pandemic, and depressions, neuroses, anxieties. It's all coming and boiling up to the surface. I know this because it's also been happening to me, because not only do I have to deal with the pandemic and all the negativity and craziness in the world, but as most people know, because I've beaten this horse dead, I'm also sick. So I've been sick for about 7 months with a disease which probably is the C virus, without spelling it out and getting in trouble. So this has been a huge test of my psychology. It's been a huge test of my ability to adapt to new environments. And as I often say, at the end of the day, I will come out of this stronger and better. And those of you who don't, maybe you're not in a situation quite as severe as mine, but you're still being greatly affected by the world and the events, and you feel that neurosis bubbling up, I think that these are some of the books and the works, the thoughts that you should draw your attention towards. Okay, so next. The next quote that Michael Time uses is, "Neither a person nor a nation can exist without some higher idea," wrote Fyodor Dostoevsky, the renowned author of Crime and Punishment and The Brothers Karamazov. "And there is only one higher idea on earth, and it is the idea of the immortality of the human soul, for all other, quote, higher ideas of life by which humans might live derive from that idea alone." So one of the reasons I like this article by Time is because he's kind of combining Frankl and, in this case, Dostoevsky, because Frankl makes it clear that we need to have that meaning in our lives to push forward, to survive circumstances, and ultimately even to achieve our best health. But the next quote elaborates that what greater meaning is there than a higher spiritual reality, or the immortality of the soul, or a life after death? Personally, in my own life, in my own journey in this life, I have not found anything that matches that. Even if I were to place meaning on temporal matters of this world, there would always be that lingering problem that those things can be taken away. If I had a family, I could place that meaning on my children, and I would be content with that, because it's very easy to get contentment from your children. But Fortunately, all humans are mortals, even your children. All things transition out of this world. And so if your foundation is materialism, it is some kind of, I'm sorry to say, but atheism. The idea that there is no human soul, consciousness is an accident or an illusion. Then you build a foundation on how do you say it? You build a foundation of rotten wood. And when there's problems that arise up on the higher parts of the house, then the whole thing is going to collapse. But if you have a spiritual backbone, then it's amazing to what extent things that you can handle in life, things that get thrown at you, you have a much greater threshold, so to speak. Next quote. Pioneering psychiatrist Carl Jung wrote that most of his patients were non-believers, those who had lost their faith. They were neurotics. They seek position, marriage, reputation, outward success, or money, and remain unhappy and neurotic even when they have attained what they were seeking, Jung wrote. Such people are usually confined within too narrow a spiritual horizon. Their life has not sufficient content or sufficient meaning. So Jung, of course, was a proponent of, for example, life after death. He also, I believe, he had a near-death experience himself. He incorporated a lot of that into his theories, and he strongly believed that if you're going to live your life with a meaningless backbone, a meaningless foundation, a foundation of rotten wood, then what happens? You end up focusing on these temporal, earthly things, status, fame, money, the things that so many people do, and it's almost without question that those focuses lead towards some type of mental illness. Next quote. William James, one of the founders of modern psychology, put it this way: let sanguine healthy-mindedness do its best with its strange power of living in the moment and ignoring and forgetting. Still, the evil background is really there to be thought of, and the skull with a grin on it at the banquet. In the practical life of the individual, we know how his whole gloom or glee about any present fact depends on the remoter schemes and hopes of which it stands related. Its significance and framing give it the chief part of its value. Let it be known to lead nowhere, and however agreeable it may be in its immediacy, its glow and gilding vanish. Which is a repudiation of YOLO, you only live once. So that philosophy also, it's going to lead back to the same neuroses, I think. So you only live once, do whatever you want, have fun. But again, it's you'll hear people giving that advice, just live in the moment. And maybe at a deeper metaphysical level, it is good to live in the moment. But the way that's typically reported in sort of vain Gen Z/millennial philosophy, it doesn't actually provide much insight or mental health in the long term at all. Next, Time Rhodes. I like the way Air Chief Marshal Lord Dowding, Sir Hugh Dowding, put in his 1960 book God's Magic. The problem of world chaos is linked very closely with the chaos in the mind of humanity. Alfred Dowding considered the man most responsible for Great Britain's victory in the 1940 Battle of Britain during World War II. Man insists on looking outward for causes instead of looking inward. As with the individual, so with the nation. An individual who has unquiet spirit will have an unquiet environment. So I won't go into the whole article, but you can read it. I'll put the link up in the description. But in essence, we're dealing with a lot of neurosis in the country. We're dealing with people with bizarre symptoms all over the country. We're dealing with extremely divisive political matters, which are very much, in my opinion, fabricated, created to divide the country in pieces. It's sort of like we are being attacked, and it's a psychological and biological war that's happening on the USA. And it's very easy to end up a victim and a casualty of it. That is the whole point. And so as this neurosis develops, as all of these problems persist, The only thing really, the best defense, the best way to fight back is to explore spiritual topics, is to explore these types of topics, because then no matter what happens to you, you can develop that meaning, you can develop that core self, and develop that strong foundation. The same kind of meaning that would allow Viktor Frankl, his observations of concentration camp inmates. Your situation doesn't have to be that intense. But it is what the West especially needs, because materialism, it's done its part. It's tried. It hasn't worked. It hasn't added value to people's lives. And with atheism also, which is sort of the follows on the boot heels of materialism, and there has been the whole atheism renaissance in the West. And I don't see how that has led to any kind of good mental health among people. Does it mean you have to believe in God? No, I don't think you have to believe in God. But the problem, of course, with atheism is that it tends to reject, if you follow it as an ideology and you follow the speakers and lecturers and the thinkers in atheism, it by default rejects anything that is of a spiritual nature, even if there's evidence behind it, even if there's really concrete examples of transcendent spiritual experiences that makes you question and doubt them, and even your own experiences, it makes you question and doubt them, and it just in general causes a lot of problems. I don't think that this is a healthy philosophy to have, and to survive this time of turmoil and crisis in the world and in this country over here in the USA. Then more than ever is the time to develop that spiritual backbone. Maybe it's through meditation, maybe it's through out-of-body experiences, maybe it's through reading literature, reading Michael Time's blog, or reading books by authors in this field, or books by, I don't know, Jeffrey Long, for example, read about near-death experiences, whatever it may be. You can find that, I think, and that is what everybody needs to do to survive this mess. That's it. You can pick up books of my own, like Understanding Life After Death, or The Afterlife and Beyond, over at afterlifetopics.com. Get involved on the Facebook group, or just drop a comment in the comments down below and to get involved in the conversation. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all on the next video.